8 months of deceit. DNA test reveals our baby isn't mine, the shocking truth. The gentle cooing of our 8-month-old son, Thomas, usually filled me with warmth, but as I held him today, that familiar feeling was replaced by an unsettling emptiness. My wife, Rachel, sat on the edge of the floral-patterned sofa, her eyes once filled with affection now fixed on Thomas with an intensity bordering on desperation. "Look at our little man," she said, reaching out to gently stroke his soft hair. The word var hit me like a shard of glass lodged in my throat. It had once been a term I cherished, a symbol of the life we'd built together, but now it was a cruel reminder of the betrayal I was about to expose. We were in my parents' living room, a place that had always felt like a safe haven. But today, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My parents, Rachel's parents, and her younger sister, Sophie, were all gathered here, sensing that something was off. This wasn't the usual lively family gathering. There was an unnatural stillness in the air, a sense of expectation none of them fully understood. Rachel shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting around the room. "Is everything okay, Michael?" she asked, her voice higher than usual. "You've been so quiet all day." I looked down at Thomas. His innocent face stood in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. He had no idea that his world was about to be turned upside down. It was perhaps the cruelest part. "No, Rachel," I replied, my voice calm but cold. "Everything is not okay." I carefully handed Thomas to my mother, who took him with a concerned glance. Standing up, I walked deliberately to the mahogany side table, picked up the sealed envelope I had placed there earlier. The crisp white paper felt heavy with its burden, ready to reveal a truth that would unravel everything. "These came in the mail this morning," I said, holding up the envelope. "They're the results of a paternity test." Rachel's face drained of color. Her hand flew to her throat, her eyes wide with fear. She couldn't conceal it. I tore open the envelope, the sound piercing the tense silence, and pulled out the single sheet of paper with the DNA results, the evidence of a truth that could no longer be ignored. I handed it to her. Rachel took the paper, her hands trembling. The color drained from her face as she read it, her breath catching in her throat. The room was still. Everyone held their breath, unknowingly playing their parts in a drama none of them had anticipated. After what felt like an eternity, she finally looked up. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. This can't be right," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, it's right," I said, my voice sharp. "According to these results, Thomas is not my son." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's mother gasped quietly, but the sound seemed to vanish in the suffocating stillness. My mother, holding Thomas protectively, glared at Rachel with a silent fury I had never seen before. Rachel's father looked as though he had aged a decade in an instant, and Sophie's eyes were filled with such disdain that Rachel had to look away. I watched as the delicate illusion of our marriage and life together crumbled into nothing. Who is his father?" Rachel choked out, her eyes pleading with me. But I offered her no comfort. My heart had been torn out long ago. It was no longer my responsibility to ease her pain. I locked eyes with her. "That's a question you'll need to answer," I said coldly. "And you can start by explaining why you thought you could get away with this." The weight of the unspoken words hung in the air, thick and heavy. She began to sob, her carefully constructed world falling apart around her. "I didn't mean to," she wailed, her voice filled with helplessness. "It just happened." The words felt hollow, almost insulting in their predictability. "It just happened," I repeated, my voice rising with anger. "A baby, Rachel? This wasn't some drunken mistake at a party. This was months of lies, of deceit. You brought another man's child into our home, into my life, and you had the nerve to call it ours." The rage that had been simmering inside me finally erupted. I was seething, and I felt an overwhelming urge to destroy something, anything. I took a step toward her, my voice a low growl. "Pack your things," I said, pointing toward the door. "You're leaving." Rachel's eyes widened in shock, terror flooding her face. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't care where you go," I replied coldly. I responded coldly, "Just take him with you," as I motioned toward Thomas, who was now wriggling in my mother's arms. "But Michael, he's just a baby." Rachel stammered, tears streaming down her face. "No, he's not my child," I retorted coldly. "He's the product of your treachery, and I want both of you out of my house." The room remained eerily still. My parents, Rachel's parents, and her sister Sophie were all in stunned silence. None of them had expected my bluntness, yet they couldn't comprehend the depth of my agony, the kind that had burrowed so deeply within me. I needed them gone, both Rachel and her deceitful child. Rachel, realizing that my mind was made up, started to pack her belongings. Her sobs grew louder and more frantic, yet despite the horror on her face, my mother gently handed Thomas back to Rachel. I felt a brief pang in my chest, but I quickly dismissed it. He was no longer my son, and I was done pretending otherwise. As Rachel struggled to place Thomas into his carrier, I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood waiting for them to leave. Her parents and sister remained frozen, unable to meet my gaze. I had become a stranger to them, someone they no longer recognized, and frankly, I no longer cared. Rachel finally walked out, her face an unreadable mask of despair. I slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the now empty house. My parents approached me, concern etched on their faces. "Michael, are you sure this is the right decision?" my mother asked, her voice thick with worry. "Yes," I replied, my tone unwavering and firm. "I'm taking back my life." Without looking back, I walked past them and got into my car. Determination set in my mind. I had to confront the man who had betrayed me. The man who had slept with my wife and fathered a child I thought was mine. I drove straight to the gym, where I found him in the weight room. Confronting him, I let the fury I'd been holding inside spill out. The confrontation ended just as I imagined, with a brutal beating. I left him there, battered and broken, a mere shell of the cocky man he once was. Next, I went to the police station and turned myself in. The following days passed in a blur of legal matters. I pled guilty and accepted my sentence. As I awaited my sentencing, I heard about the fallout from my actions. Rachel became a pariah in her town. The news of her infidelity spread like wildfire. She lost her job, her friends abandoned her, and her parents were horrified. Her lover's life had also crumbled. He was left with nothing but the wreckage of broken promises and shattered dreams. Rachel tried to contact me, begging for forgiveness, but I refused to speak with her. I was done with her lies and deceit. I wanted nothing to do with her. I won't lie. Thomas caused me a moment of doubt, but I knew I couldn't look at him without remembering her betrayal. I decided to let her handle him. I served my time, and when I was released, I left that life behind. I moved to a new city, started a new job, and began to rebuild. I focused on my career and healing. It was slow, but I made progress. I began seeing a therapist who helped me work through my anger and pain. She showed me that I was a good man, deserving of happiness and a real family. Over time, I began dating again. It was at a quaint bookstore that I met Emma, not Rachel's sister, but another woman named Emma. She had bright eyes and a smile that could light up any room. She shared my passion for books, and we instantly connected. Something felt right, something I had never experienced with Rachel. We started dating, and over time, I fell in love with her. She was everything Rachel wasn't, kind, honest, and genuine. She listened to me, understood my pain, and never judged me for what had happened. She simply helped me heal. A year into our relationship, I asked Emma to marry me, and she said yes. We had a small, intimate wedding with our closest friends and family. Soon after, we welcomed our first child, a baby boy with my eyes and Emma's radiant smile. We named him Noah, and he became the center of our world. As I held him in my arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. I looked at Emma, my wife, and knew I had finally found the happiness I deserved. I never forgot what Rachel had done, nor the pain she had caused me, but I had moved on. I had built a new life, a new family, and I was content. My life was full now, and the silence I once knew was replaced with laughter, love, and the happy chatter of my children. I had gotten the revenge I sought, but more importantly, I had found the happiness I truly deserved. My story was no longer one of tragedy, but one of resilience, an understanding that even after the darkest storms, the sun can still shine. We had another child, a little girl named Grace. My family was finally complete. My new life was everything I had ever wanted. As I sat watching my children play, I knew I had found my happy ending, not because of what happened, but in spite of it.